Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. If you caught last week's video, we were working on a 35 Ford chassis. And in that episode, we installed the rear end, parallel leaf springs, we did a sway bar, we did the shocks, and basically have the rear end of the car set up. So in this week's video, we're going to carry on with the same project. It's going to be a 35 Ford pickup is ultimately what it's going to be. So what we've got to do in this week's episode is I have to make a repair to the X member here. Somebody kind of butchered up and stick welded some stuff on here. So I'm going to cut that out, fix it up. Then I'm going to work to the front and I'm going to box this section here on both sides, and then what we're going to do is there's a Mustang II front end here. We're going to start putting that in this chassis. So follow along as we keep on working on the 35 Ford pickup chassis. So here is the piece that I cut out of the frame. You can see, hopefully you can see that, how it was kind of one piece of metal welded on top of another, kind of distorted and everything else. So what I've done, I've cut that section out. Made up a new piece that's 125 thick, which is actually thicker than the original stuff, or at least the metal that's in the frame. And now I'm just getting ready to weld that on. We'll weld it on. I've got the holes drilled in the original positions, and I'll just dress that up and I'll show you here in a couple minutes. So there's that repair, just a quick little repair to kind of restore the frame to at least look like it was before. And there's no longer that big bump on top of it. Got all the location holes back there. I'm not sure if we're going to be using those holes, but I put the holes back in it. So that way, if it is something that we have to bolt to for the body or something, or the floor, or brakes, or whatever the case is, we've got the holes back where they're supposed to be. So that's repaired. Now what I got to do is figure out where the Mustang II front end goes and start making the boxing plates. I've ground the inside of the frame there in preparation to, I guess, start welding and fitting the boxing plates up. The customer had removed the front cross member before it came here, so he's got that rod there. We're still sitting level, so I should be okay. But what I'll do is I'll set up some strings and stuff and go off the rear end and set the wheelbase for the front, make a mark there, and then start building the boxing plates. Now that I've got the boxing plates on and all dressed and welded in place, I made sure that the frame is still level. I went ahead and then I measured from the center of the rear axle. What I did, I put a couple magnets down there, and I used my measuring tape, and I measured off 112 inches from there up to this point, and I put a center punch here. I did the same thing over on the other side, right there. Got the little points in. And then I did a sanity check by measuring from the center of the rear crossmember right there, diagonally, off to these points to make sure that those are exactly the same place, to be sure that the front crossmember is square with the front of the car. So we need that line there to basically line up the bottom of the Mustang II crossmember. So right now I've got the Mustang II crossmember over here on the bench. What I've done is, it came to me, it was painted, so I dressed off the paint around the edges where I'm going to weld it. The other thing is that the lower control arms, as you see here, they're powder coated, so I don't think that these lower control arms came with the kit. I think the owner, and he's told me this over and over again, he's had various kits, and this is from this and that's from that. They've been sitting around for quite a while, so these rubber boots are all cracked up. So we got some new ones coming in. So before I get these in the car, those will be replaced. But right now what I'm doing is I was machining out these holes so that the bolts will fit through. Then I was dressing off this lower bar here, cleaning it up so that now I can weld it inside the crossmember. So I'm going to do that on the other side. Once I'm happy with it, I'll take this crossmember out, I'll stick it in the frame, and over here, and I'll tack it in place. Once it's tacked in place, then I will actually weld those tubes in place, as you see right there. So follow along, we're making progress on the 35 Ford pickup chassis. Sorry I didn't set up the time-lapse video, kind of forgot to. I got carried away with putting this in, but essentially I put the lower crossmember in, marked where the center line of the front axle is right there at the 112-inch mark. Tacked everything in place, made sure the frame was level, made sure the crossmember was level. They give you a measurement from here to here. It was 40 3/16 of an inch or something like that. I'd have to go back to the measure. But anyways, off the instructions, it told you what it was. We're sitting exactly the right dimension. So I just followed the instructions and tacked it, checked it, and then finished welded it. Next, and the lower control arms, I just left those in. Everything's all welded there. Everything doesn't bind, it moves up and down like it's supposed to. The next step is to put the hats on, and essentially the hats from the instructions are 1 inch and 9/16 from this point of the back of the crossmember to here. So they are going to mount like that. So I'm going to clean these up, get all the paint off of them, and then put those on. And then we're moving along with a Mustang II front end. So everything is going good, everything is straight, everything is level, everything is square. Can't ask for more, don't want to jinx it, but it's going good so far. So here's the instructions. I made reference to a 40-inch dimension from the crossmember, the edge of the crossmember to the edge of the crossmember. It's actually 30 5/16. I didn't want to mislead you, so I went back and checked it. And then these instructions, I think, are from 2008. They were faxed through, so it's been sitting around for a while. And then from the instructions right there, so that's where I'm getting the 1 inch and 9/16 from the instructions. I would imagine Speedway and everybody else has their own. More than likely they're the same dimensions, but just follow the instructions. Most of these are pretty straightforward to put in, and just check measurements, tack it, weld it, and then it usually turns out quite well. Worst case, if you tack it and the dimensions are off, you cut it and then re-tack it again. So anyways, we're carrying on here. More to come. So here we are. I've got the upper spring mounts mounted in, and I've got the upper control arms kind of bolted in. I may have done too many time lapses there without explaining what I was doing, but here we are now. We're at this stage. So the next up, I'm going to put those springs in, and what I've got, and I did this in another episode, I've got a big threaded rod and a bar. I am going to take the lower control arms off. I'm going to put the bar and the rod up from underneath, and then I'm going to compress the spring. And then as the spring compresses, I should be able to hook the lower control, put the bolt in the lower control arm. And I did that before on the 40 Plymouth. So I'll set the time lapse up as I do that. So I'm going to do that on both sides. What I may do first though is I may dummy in the spindles and kind of get a basic alignment done on the spindles to estimate the ride height so I can tighten down those upper control arms. But once we have that done, we'll carry on with the rest of the assembly. So Mustang II is going forward here. So there's both coil springs installed. I'm not sure how much of the time lapse we're going to include, but when I put the first coil spring on, I must have had to put it on and off 3, 4, 5 times over here on the passenger side in order to get the lower control arm hooked back in. Over here on the driver's side, what I chose to do, I actually was able to take the spring, leave the lower control arm connected, run, and I didn't time lapse this, I ran the threaded rod through the coil spring just like I did on the other side, but I was able to open up enough so that I could actually just basically compress the coil spring up into the top hat and then hook up the spindle. I was not able to do that over there when we did it on the 40 Plymouth. Basically, we installed the Mustang II on this one and basically had to install it. And actually, the lower control arms went in really easy relative to this one. I noticed on this particular front end, the upper control arm seemed to be a little shorter. Might be because the frame's a little wider, not really sure, but I'm sure that the geometry is the same. This is it's pretty straightforward stuff. So right now we have both of the coil springs in, the spindle's attached, and then what I've got to do, we are going to paint a couple things. Going to paint the calipers and the caliper brackets as well as the shocks, give them a coat of black paint. Customer wanted that done, but as far as the frame stuff, he already said, you know, the frame is in primer. He is going to either disassemble it or mask it off and paint it himself. So another step forward on the Mustang II front end. So today I'm making more progress putting the Mustang II together, putting the brakes on and steering. Had a few hiccups here. Not sure why. I think the steering rack must have been from like a Mustang or something, or Mustang II. So one of the issues is that this rod was actually too long. Once I threaded the tie rod end on, oh, sorry about that. Once I threaded it on, I ran out of room to basically adjust it. So what I did, I cut 3/4 of an inch off of this rod. Now I Googled it just to see if I was crazy or something, but I guess it's actually quite common. I mean, in this case where the components were brought from different kits and we kind of pieced it together, you should be suspicious of that. Whereas like if you bought a complete kit from Speedway or Heights or somebody like that, then you probably wouldn't expect to have that situation. Another hiccup that I faced was that when I went to put the brake brackets on, there was where can we see it? I had to grind away this area here for clearance to the back of the rotor. So that took a little bit of time to figure that out and sort it out. One thing I do is when I put these brake brackets on, much like I do on other cars, the 2 bolts that hold them to the spindle, I always use a Loctite on them and then torque them down. You don't want those coming loose. Unfortunately, one time I did have them come loose, caught it, nothing serious happened, but you want that stuff not vibrating loose onto you. Right now, what I'm about to do though is I'm going to adjust the toe in, I'm going to rough it in. The Mustang II front ends, from what I could read online, it varies from +1/8 to -1/8 toe in, whereas typically with the solid axle front ends, we use about a 1/16 of an inch toe in. So I'm either going to aim for neutral on this, because ultimately once the car is put together, all the weight on it and everything else, this front end is going to have to go to a front end shop and actually get a real deal, you know, laser or whatever it is that they do these days to do a full alignment. Right now I've got the caster and camber roughed into where it should be, but again, it's going to be what matters is when it's all put together and everything else. So we'll get it really close. Same thing with the toe in here. I'm just going to put a tape measure between those 2 bars there, front and back, and then make sure that the distance between the bars in the front here, from here to there, is 0 or 1/8 less than what it is when I measure between the bars behind the rotors. So I'm going to keep on going here. One other hiccup we came across is Over here, the caps that go onto the bearings, those are not the right size, so we're going to have to get another set of caps. Must have got mixed up from another kit, so for the time being I'm just going to leave those open. We won't transport it until we get the right size caps. So again, just going to do the toe in, probably put the shocks on, and then work on the sway bar. Here we are. The last thing I had left to do was put the front sway bar on. This front sway bar is a height sway bar. I think it was bought from Speedway, but I didn't have the instructions. Maybe none came with it, I'm not really sure. But it wasn't really difficult to put on. Essentially, there's these heim joints and a little rod that goes up to the sway bar on the other side. I hooked that up and basically positioned these mounts, and it became quite evident that the bottom bracket actually mounted in one of the existing frame holes. Everything lines up perfectly for it, and then I just drilled another hole here, another 7/16 hole in the front to locate these the sway bar on. And then the last thing to do was just to put the front wheels on, and that kind of uses up all the parts that the customer has sent. There's not much more we can do until we either get the brake system or the engine. Now, the last conversation I had with them, there's supposed to be a small DeSoto Hemi and an automatic transmission going in this, and then he's going to bring me up the brake pedals and all the brake system to hook it up like I've done for other chassis for him. So that's it for this particular episode for the 35 Ford chassis, 35 Ford pickup chassis, that is. So please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Send me any comments you might have, and I'll see you next week. Everybody take care.